Hi, fourth grade. All right, so your second video lesson for today, Thursday, March 26th, is for ELA. We're gonna focus again on Fudge-a-Mania. Remember a couple days ago, we read chapter 11. I read about half the pages to you and I let you finish the chapter. So similar structure today, we're gonna be reading chapter 12 together, but I'm not gonna read the whole chapter to you. So before we begin, I want to review chapter 11. Okay, so chapter 11, Jimmy and Sheila agree that Peter has a crush on Izzy. Remember that phrase, dizzy for Izzy. And they make fun of him about it for a bit. You can probably remember Peter getting a little annoyed, a little defensive. ISAF stands for I swallowed a fly. And then it was easy for Peter to pour juice on Fudge. I'm going over the questions, by the way, because as we all know, Fudge is kind of annoying. And so Peter let that get the best of him and poured juice. So moving on to chapter 12. So if you don't already, hopefully you have your packet and it's opened up to the page for chapter 12. I'm going to read these questions to you. Hopefully you're reading along in your own packet. Number 1 says, what is the person overboard rule during sailing? Number 2, who ends up being the most knowledgeable about sailing? Number 3, what does the saying, all's well that ends well mean? And then number 4, why is the chapter called Baby Feet? What does Tootsie do that helps Mr. Fargo? Okay, so again, we're gonna go to the book and chapter 12 begins on page 107. Anyways, and let me look to see how many pages are in this chapter. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So around 7 pages. I might stop a little earlier. Page, the 6th page of the chapter, I'll stop. Okay, just for the length of this video. All right, chapter 12, Baby Feet. Mr. Fargo set up an outdoor studio in the side yard. He spread his canvas on the grass like a rug. On Saturday morning, I saw him climb a ladder with a bucket of blue paint. When he got to the top, he tossed it at his canvas. So when Sheila screamed, "Mrs. Hatcher, come quick, Fudge is all blue," I figured he'd gotten into Mr. Fargo's paint. It's a logical thought. Grandma and Mom came running from one direction, me and Jimmy from another. Fudge was sprawled out on the ground near his garden. His face was streaked with blue. His shirt was stained blue. His hands were blue. He had blue in his hair. Even his tongue, which hung halfway out his mouth, was blue. Mr. Fargo's going to go nuts, I told Mom. None of us are supposed to go anywhere near his art supplies. I don't think it's paint, Mom said, spying an empty fruit basket on the ground. She picked it up and waved it at Fudge. Did you eat up all the blueberries? Fudge moaned. Okay, so it's not paint. We can figure out it's blueberries. And Fudge moaned, so maybe he's got like a stomach ache. Let's see. You ate our blueberries, I said. Jimmy and I were on our knees more than 2 hours picking them, and Grandma was going to bake us a pie. I didn't eat them all, Fudge said in a very small voice. Turtle ate some. Remember, Turtle is the dog, okay. You fed Turtle blueberries? I asked. He liked them. Turtle's a dog, I said. At the sound of his name, Turtle appeared from behind the bushes. He plopped down next to me. Let me see your tongue, I said, opening his mouth, blue. His tongue and teeth were all blue. Fudge clutched his stomach and moaned again. Boy, are you going to be sick, Jimmy told him. I already am, Fudge cried. My tummy hurts so bad. Okay, so he ate too many blueberries. He's feeling sick to his stomach now. I'm not surprised, Mom said. I know exactly what he needs, Grandma said, heading for the house. She came back with that peppermint medicine we get every time We have an upset stomach. Down the hatch, she sang, feeding him 1 teaspoonful. How about some for Turtle? I asked. Why not? Grandma said. What's good for the goose is good for the gardener. I held Turtle's mouth open and Grandma poured in a spoonful. Blue gas, Jimmy whispered. He's going to make blue, steamy, gurgling gas. It's pretty gross. I don't want blue gas, Fudge cried. What are you talking about? Mom said. There's no such thing as blue gas. There is if you eat enough blueberries, I told her. Really, Peter? Mom said. Let's not make this any worse than it already is. Oh boy, Fudge always getting in trouble. Okay, so I'm in the middle of 109. We're still not on any of the questions yet, so let's keep reading. Dad missed the blueberry adventure. He'd gone to the town dock right after breakfast to see about renting a sailboat. By the time he got back, Mom had carried Fudge to the porch where he lay on the old wicker couch. Everyone gathered around the blueberry boy. Everyone had a suggestion for him. Lie on your tummy, Fudge, Mrs. Tubman said. That's what I do when mine hurts. A hot water bottle, Mr. Tubman said. That'll fix it. Make beautiful pictures in your mind, Buzzy Sr. suggested. Just throw it all up, Mr. Fargo said. Sheila was about to say, ew, disgusting, when Dad ran up the porch steps. I've rented a nice little 19-footer, he announced. You could tell he was really excited. We can take a picnic lunch. He stopped when he saw Fudge. What's wrong with Fudgy? He asked Mom. Why is he all blue? It's a long story, Mom said. I'll tell you about it later. Dad paused for a minute and shook his head. Then he said, well, I've got the boat from noon to 4, and I can take up to 6 passengers. I know Peter wants to come. How about the rest of you? I've never been sailing, Jimmy said. No problem, Sheila told him. I'm an expert. I'll explain everything to you. Somebody should tell the Guinness Book of World Records about her, I thought, since she's the world's leading expert on everything. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. Okay, we're not quite at any of the questions yet, but I did want to pause because Sheila was saying that she's like an expert on sailing. And one of the questions does ask who ends up being most knowledgeable. I don't think it's Sheila, so let's pay attention. Count me in, Grandma said. Count me out, Buzzy Sr. said. Buzzy, Grandma said. You don't like sailing? About as much as a fish likes being out of water, Mr. Fargo said. Thanks, but no thanks. Mrs. Tubman said she really wasn't into water sports, but she'd go if Mr. Tubman would. Mr. Tubman said he had no sailing experience, but he'd always wanted to give it a try. What about Fudgy? Sheila asked Mom. Fudge isn't going anywhere, Mom said. Except to the bathroom, Jimmy whispered to me, and we both cracked up. So you can understand why he's only going to the bathroom. He's got an upset stomach, and he's not going sailing. All right, boys and girls, I am on page 111. We're still not on any of the questions, so let's keep reading. All 7 of us piled into the back of Mr. Fargo's truck. Have a good sail, he called when he dropped us off with our gear. The boat Dad rented was tied to the deck. It looked kind of small, especially next to the really big boats that were moored to the harbor. That's a new word. We should look that up later. As soon as we were on board, Dad handed out life jackets. There was one for each of us, and Dad's rule was we had to wear it the whole time. That's a good man. Safety first. We're going to keep reading. Then he started to explain the man overboard rule. Ooh, we're at a question. Excuse me, Mr. Hatcher, Sheila said. But couldn't we call it the person overboard rule? I mean, man overboard sounds so sexist. Okay, Dad said, the person overboard rule. He appointed Mrs. Tubman and me official spotters. If anyone fell into the water, our job was to point. No matter how the boat turned, no matter how it rocked, the spotter had to keep pointing so the person overboard didn't get lost. Okay, so what is the person overboard rule during sailing? Okay, so remember, someone's overboard. I think it's Peter and Mrs. Tubman are appointed to point to the person overboard, and they have to keep track of them. So make sure that you write that down. You can pause at this point to write that down and resume, but I'm going to keep reading. I'm at the bottom of page 111. Maybe I should just wait here, Jimmy said. Nah, once we get going, you're going to like it, I told him. I don't know, Jimmy said. I'm not the world's greatest swimmer. Nobody's going swimming, I said. This water's so cold, you'd have hypothermia in a couple of minutes. Hypo who? Jimmy said. Hypothermia, I said. That's when your body temperature falls really low. Most people die when they fall in the water. Die from that, not from drowning. I think Jimmy would have jumped back onto the deck if we hadn't sailed away right then. Oh, my hat, Mrs. Tubman cried. As we got going, the wind took my hat. We watched as it slowly drifted down into the water. She lost her hat. Sorry, Jean, Dad said. You should have pinned it to your hair. I didn't know, Mrs. Tubman said. Now you do, Dad told her. I really liked that hat, Mrs. Tubman mumbled. I don't think Dad heard her. He was at the tiller, which is the stick that steers the boat. Soon we were moving along really fast for a sailboat. I liked the whoosh, whoosh sound as the boat cut through the water. Dad relaxed a bit. So did the rest of us. We held our faces up to catch a few rays. Don't forget to use plenty of sun lotion, Grandma said. Sheila slathered it all over herself. By the time she was done, she smelled like a coconut factory. I never burn, Jimmy told Grandma. Me neither, I said. Aren't you lucky, Grandma said. We sailed along that way for an hour before Dad called. Anybody ready for lunch? Yes, we all answered at once. We dropped anchor near a small island. I handed out our lunch bags. Jimmy had brought his favorite, sardines and onions on rye. It's interesting. The rest of us had cold chicken left over from last night's dinner. Am I hungry, Jimmy said, gobbling up one sardine and onion sandwich and starting on the next. Me too, Sheila said. I've never been so hungry in my life. It's the salt air, Grandma said. It does wonders for your appetite. The three of us polished off a box of cookies, and all the juice. Then we hit the fruit. Don't stuff yourselves, Grandma told us. It's better to eat lightly when you're sailing. But we're anchored now, Jimmy said, helping himself to a second peach. Grandma raised her eyebrows. After lunch, we relaxed for a bit. Dad took a snooze. Grandma and Mrs. Tubman had a heavy discussion about the problems of the city. Mr. Tubman read a mystery, and the three of us played hearts with the deck of cards Sheila had brought in her pack. I'm always prepared, she told us. After a couple of hands, she said, speaking of prepared, is there a bathroom on this boat? Look around, I told her. Do you see a bathroom? Since we were in an open boat, it didn't take much to figure out the answer to that question. Well, what's a person supposed to do? She asked. A person is supposed to go before. I did. Then a person is supposed to wait until we're back. She checked her watch. That's almost 2 more hours. So she's got to hold it for 2 hours. Let's see if she can do it. If it's an emergency, Dad has a bucket. I told her. A bucket? Sheila said. That's disgusting, Jimmy and I sang at the same time. Just when I think it's possible that the two of you are human beings, you prove that I'm wrong. Sheila's outburst woke Dad. He checked his watch. We better get started. We'll be heading into the wind on the way back, so it's going to take longer. Once we're underway, it felt a lot colder than before. I'm going to pause for a second here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. I'm going to read the rest of this paragraph. So I'm at the top of 115, and then I'm going to cut it off so you guys can finish the chapter. We pulled on sweatshirts. Sheila shivered and moved closer to me. I moved away from her and closer to Jimmy. It got more and more windy as the sky filled with big gray clouds. The boat tipped and water splashed over the rail, spraying us. All right, so the weather's changing. It's getting a little windy. There's some gray clouds coming in. Sheila's got to go to the restroom, but there's no restroom on the boat. So I'll let you guys finish the chapter. Remember that you guys need to figure out number 2, 3, and 4, okay? If you need any questions, let me know on Dojo or Google Classroom. All right, kids, I'll talk to you guys later. See you tomorrow on Zoom. All right.